Ms. Freeland, what's the new job? Can you talk to us about your new job?
How about some sort of soundbite?
It's a great day. Thank
Can
you.
you tell us anything about your new job?
Anything at all?
Okay, so we begin with a high-profile departure from cabinet as Chrystia Freeland is resigning from the Prime Minister's front bench and will soon resign as an MP. Mark Carney says she'll instead serve as Canada's new special representative for the reconstruction of Ukraine. The CBC's Ashley Burke has been on this story all day for us. She joins me now in the studio. So Ashley, 9 months to the day since she last quit. I mean, what do we know about Chrystia Freeland's departure and this new role?
Well, David, I was up on the Hill today when Chrystia Freeland walked up to go to her last cabinet meeting and resign. And she came up with the Prime Minister after a couple of hours, and he very deliberately walked her in front of the cameras, in front of reporters, with a smile on their faces to get that shot, but they didn't comment. And you saw there, that's the only thing that Chrystia Freeland said on camera today, that it was a great day. She later put out her own letter online, laying out her decision. She says that it was time to end this chapter of her political life. She talked about how she's not going to be running in the next federal election, that this wasn't a decision to spend more time with her family. It wasn't because the burden of political life was too great, she said, but rather it was a decision. She said that after 12 years, it was time to make way for other people, and also to look for new opportunities, new challenges. The Prime Minister then went on social media after all of that and posted that he had this new role for her, this special representative position to help with the reconstruction of Ukraine, which a source says would involve working with Ukrainian leaders to help get their economy back on track in Ukraine. And then a source also told us that in terms of when she's going to actually step down as an MP, that's going to happen soon, but that there's not a date in particular set. And this new role she's taking on is just one of several tasks that she's expected to continue with after this. Also said she wanted to do something else, had something else in mind in terms of international diplomacy, and might write again.
Yeah, it was spoke to someone who knows Freeland, and that she had decided she was going to leave. She wanted to get the One Canada economy legislation through, wanted to do a few announcements, and told the Prime Minister in August, and it was in the course of the conversations about timing that they came up with this role. So we'll see how long this lasts and what exactly it does. But look, it was 9 months ago to the day that she resigned as finance minister. Not quite as controversial today, but still lots of reaction on the Hill. What did you hear?
There was a lot of reaction once the news started actually coming out on the record from her and the Prime Minister. And, you know, people talked about the fact that she was a really vocal opponent of Russia's aggression. She was even sanctioned. She's not allowed to go to Russia because Putin put her on a sanctions list, which she said was a badge of honor. She's someone who's really been a very vocal, helping lead the government's efforts to provide support to Ukraine. She's visited. She knows President Zelensky personally herself from those visits. So a lot of people on the Hill were talking about how they thought that liberals say that they thought she was the right person for this role. But also people were reflecting on her past 12 years in office. And here's what they had to say.
I think that Chrystia is a great Canadian who broke a lot of barriers. She was our first female finance minister.
She's been a role model and a leader in caucus, and somebody whose opinion, you know, we value dearly.
Part of her legacy will be bringing down Justin Trudeau. I think Canadians will remember that. I think Liberals will remember that.
Chrystia was kind of the gold standard for how cabinet ministers should treat the rest in terms of letting them into what you're thinking.
She was part of the government last Parliament, where we had the historic confidence supply agreement, first time in Canadian history.
I think Chrystia Freeland is an exceptionally qualified person for the new role she's taken on. She has always been a very valued colleague.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre just held a scrum up on Parliament Hill too and took aim at Freeland on her way out. This is what he had to say.
I think it was that she resigned rather than introduce a $62 billion deficit. I think she said the Liberals were trying to force her to introduce a deficit of $62 billion. And she said, this is irresponsible, it is out of control, and it will cause massive inflation. And of course, that deficit went ahead anyway, and now it's even bigger. She's probably trying to get out of town and as far away as possible before this disastrous November budget comes, and I don't blame her.
Also at Rideau Hall today, there was a swearing-in ceremony. Stephen McKinnon's going to take over Freeland's transport file, and Dominic LeBlanc is going to assume the responsibilities of her internal trade file. So that also happened today. It was a very busy political day.
The two ministers they always turn to when there's a vacancy and a crisis. All right, Ashley, thank you so much. That's the CBC's Ashley Burke. Look, on a day like this, we got to get to the power panel early. We've got them here to talk about this big story. Cameron Ahmad was the head of communications to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Lisa Raitt is a former Conservative cabinet minister. Cheryl Oates was director of communications for former Alberta NDP Premier Rachel Notley, and Emily Nicolas is a columnist for Le Devoir. It is good to see you all. Thank you for answering the bell a little bit early. Cameron, I'm told Freeland decided over the summer she was going to leave cabinet, and it was in conversations around timing that this role came up. And this is why we get the announcement today, not necessarily, as Mr. Poilievre was implying, that she doesn't like the fiscal direction of the Mark Carney government, but politics is going to politics. What do you make of this today?
Politics sure is going to politic. Look, I think it's a good moment to reflect on everything she's contributed to Canada as a leader, as a politician. She helped govern the country through some of the most historically difficult periods in recent memory. She helped renegotiate. She led the renegotiation of NAFTA and dealt with the first Trump White House. She helped lead the country through COVID. She helped sign a trade deal with Europe. She was a strong woman who stood up to authoritarians as foreign minister, and most notably, and is probably most recognized around the world, for her support of Ukraine. And I think that's why this role that the Prime Minister announced for her today is absolutely perfect for her. There's frankly nobody better to do this work than she. And not just from a Canadian perspective, for Ukrainian Canadians who would see her as a leader in this kind of work, but also around the world. She's also one of the smartest people that I've ever had the privilege of working with. And I think it's hard to find someone who matches her depth of knowledge and history, and just wit and intelligence. So politics is a rough sport. And of course, the opposition might try and suggest that her departure is related to something else. But you can also take these things at face value sometimes, because that's what they are. And she saw an opportunity, and the Prime Minister saw an opportunity for her to do something different and where she can bring a really good contribution.
Yeah, and Lisa, when I heard that this was happening today, I was having flashbacks to last December when we were on the air for like 12 hours straight. Stepping down from cabinet amicably, it appears this time, will eventually leave as an MP, but not right away, wants to talk to her riding association and do that at a time in a minority parliament when it's not dangerous. What are your thoughts on this as Chrystia Freeland says goodbye for the second time in 9 months?
She had a heck of a run, didn't she? I mean, she had all the portfolios, literally all of the portfolios, and was deputy prime minister. She has lots to look back and be proud of. And I am grateful for one very important thing. Somebody has finally put to rest that damn phrase, I'm doing this to spend time with my family and children.
She was explicit that wasn't the reason, which I don't know how her family is going to take it. But yeah, she wants to do other things professionally. Yeah.
She said it was an honor, and her family was honored to be part of the political process, which is a far better, I think, line than when other politicians leave and say, I'm going to spend time with my family. So I hope she's killed that forever. And that's what I wrote her today when I wrote her. I said, thank you for getting rid of that phrase.
Well, you know, Cheryl, she resigns on September 16th after resigning on December 16th of last year and tabling a budget on April 16th of last year. So there's some Taylor Swift stuff happening with the 16th. But, you know, that's about as conspiratorial as I think you can get with this based on the information we have right now. What are your thoughts on Freeland's departure here?
I agree with what Lisa and Cameron said before me, that partisanship aside, it doesn't matter where your political allegiance lies. I think we can all say that Chrystia Freeland has made a massive contribution to Canadian public service and to Canadian public policy, and that she has proven herself a very skilled politician who cares deeply about her country. And you know what? Not every politician, especially when you get to this level, gets to leave on their own terms. And so it's really nice to see someone, especially a woman, be able to leave on her own terms, be able to take on a job which she seems to be really excited about and really well suited for, and be able to send the kind of letter that she did to her constituents and to the country about her reason for leaving. And I also loved that line that Lisa raised because it's such a tired trope, and it's nice to see someone embedded in politics say that it's a privilege at a time when many view politics as just so toxic.
Do you think she looked at her husband and kids and said, "I'm not doing this for you"? I'm just joking her. But Emily, what are your thoughts on this? Because this is the person who held like all the senior jobs, or most of the senior jobs, certainly in the Trudeau years. Less so in the Carney years, but was still in cabinet, still had an important role on domestic economic issues, and is now waving goodbye.
For all the reasons that you just outlined, I think her move makes a lot of sense. There was no way up for her, and she's a very ambitious person. I think for the right reason. I think she's called to service, but still, she's a very ambitious person. And so she resigned as Minister of Finance and went to trying to be Prime Minister. She was not going to be Prime Minister in the next little while anymore. And in terms of her responsibility, she was not being backbench per se, but it was a way down from being Minister of Finance. And I could see her thinking that, time for me to do other things. There's been rumors and conversations circulating for years about Chrystia Freeland trying to go for. At some point, it was Secretary General of NATO or other international institution. At this point, it's going to be a special envoy to Ukraine, but obviously that puts you in a room with, first of all, that puts you in Europe. And second of all, it puts you in a room with people from the European Union. Mm-hmm. And so I see that this role could be for a while, but certainly a good step stool into something into the kind of international roles that we've been speaking to for a while, for years in political circles. And that for Mark Carney, it was a good idea to let her go in the sense that now you're creating somebody who is a Canadian that could have a leadership role in international institutions that you're trying to get closer to yourself. Right. And so Mark Carney is then positioning her to be the counterpart that he's going to have to deal with anyway as Prime Minister who's interested in international affairs. So I think for her and for Mark Carney and for everyone, not trying to have somebody who tried to have your job too close in cabinet, it was a good idea. And at the same time, it's useful for both Mark Carney and Freeland. So I think strategically, politically, and in terms of value alignment, all of it makes sense. Mm.
Okay, so Cameron, at some point, University Rosedale, I believe that's the name of Chrystia Freeland's riding, that will become vacant. But there may be other by-elections coming soon because I have been told by multiple sources that Bill Blair is going to replace Ralph Goodale as High Commissioner to the United Kingdom at an unspecified future date, which means another Toronto riding held by yet another former cabinet minister, likely early in the new year, will become available for a by-election. And there's also talk of Jonathan Wilkinson maybe ending up as the special envoy to the European Union that the Prime Minister talked about. So whenever these things happen and are triggered, that is going to open up seats in a minority parliament. But they've got to get through the budget. They've got to get through the fall legislative session. I mean, how do you begin to manage this sort of a process as a political party and in a government, not in a weak position, but it is a minority situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to walk, chew gum, and do 5 other things or 50 other things at the same time. That's just always the case. There's never a quiet period for any government, especially if we look at the last 10 years and how Canada's been thrust into so many contentious situations around the world. And with what we face right now, the government absolutely has an enormous amount on its plate. I don't think it's in a weak position. Of course, in the parliamentary system we're in, yes, it is a minority, but I don't think any of the other opposition parties frankly, have an appetite for or are in a position to thrust the country into another election in any time soon. And, sure, the polling will shift slightly over the next few months. It is tough times for the country. People have braced for that. But this Prime Minister has not taken it slow since he's won the election. He has moved very quickly. He's going on another trip to Mexico in a few days. He is constantly on the move, and he is constantly talking about the things that he campaigned on, whether it's big projects, whether it's housing, whether it's dealing with the United States, whether it's new trading partners around the world. So I think if they just continue staying focused on these issues that they campaigned on and that people want them to act on, then they're in a good position moving into the new year.
But you know, Lisa, we saw with the shuffle today at Rideau Hall, like Minister of Janitorial Affairs, Dom LeBlanc, adds Internal Trade, and Steve McKinnon, the Deputy Minister of Janitorial Affairs, adds Transport. So this is holding pattern cabinet, right? Suggests that maybe there could be larger changes coming. And then you have the potential of 1, 2, maybe 3 seats opening up. I mean, this is still an political management challenge.
Sure. I also think that having the House leader try to be transport minister at the same time is difficult, to say the least.
That's tough.
So I encourage them to figure that out sooner than later, because you don't want to drop the ball on transport. My favorite portfolio of everything I ever did. The second part, though, is, look, the clock has started. So Chrystia Freeland has said she's given her notice that she's not going to be running next time. The clock for Mr. Carney to call a by-election doesn't start until Chrystia Freeland actually resigns as a member of parliament. That'll be the first one. Right. And then the dominoes will fall from there. So March 16 is it's the beginning of when there's going to be some kind of by-election, and whether or not you gather all kinds of them up, you may very well be in a situation where it's going to be a summer by-election after the second budget is passed, and it's not really that big in issues management. What I do find interesting is that Mr. Carney is replacing all the very familiar Trudeau faces in his cabinet, and it's looking a lot different than the last cabinet, and I think that's kind of interesting, possibly even clever.
Well, there's a big under new management sign on West Block when you go up there now, Cheryl, because you are seeing a big departure and change. Your thoughts on this, and then Emily, and then we're going to take a break.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what you have to do to fill the positions that are open as soon as you can to make sure that there's not a gap there. I do think Mark Carney has sort of been signaling that there would be further refresh from the very beginning to say, like, you know, we'll do some steady as she goes, but as he gets comfortable in the role, there may be people who he'd like to see move up into the cabinet because of the way that they're performing. And if there are people moving into other roles and opening up by-elections, in the case of Chrystia Freeland, if the rest look like that, it's kind of a win-win. People who are seasoned veterans who've got what they wanted out of government get to move on, and he gets to fill a spot with maybe a fresh face that the country's not used to, like he has in Hodgson.
Yes, Emily, seeing people who impress you want to move up, but also maybe seeing people who don't impress you that you might have to move down. I mean, these are the choices a prime minister has to make. Your thoughts on this, and then we'll take a break.
Well, job performance is only a part of it. There's also the question of ideas. Mark Carney is a different man, ideology, than Justin Trudeau was, and he's moving away from his legacy in some part. I thought it was really interesting that you had an environmental caucus of Liberal MPs that was formed during the cabinet retreat in Edmonton. That shows that the people who are more progressive within the party are feeling the need to gather, to have their voices heard. And so I feel, depending on what direction Mark Carney is going to go in the next couple of weeks, depending on great projects, depending as well on the next budget, you might see some people moving up just because they're more comfortable defending those ideas than they were when they were at the forefront of the Justin Trudeau government. It's not just a matter of competency. It's very much a matter of values. Also in politics, sometimes we forget that they play a role. And Mark Carney is moving in a direction that people are discovering as it unfolds. And I think sometimes it's about shifting people to roles in which they're not going to be directly in the midst of the things they don't agree with as much. But sometimes as well, especially if people have been in service for a really long time, they can just, take up an embassy or do something that's like within the Liberal frame a little bit further. And be grateful for the years of service and move on and not be in the awkward position of having to smile and nod at things that they don't agree with.